Guys, we're back in the Back Bay project. We haven't updated this project in a little bit, but we've gotten a lot done and it's just becoming more and more complex. Tim, what are you doing with string lines on the floor here?
We're trying to find the high spots and low spots in the flooring that we haven't flattened yet.
So downstairs, we reframed everything. That's completely flat and level. Up here, early on, you can see that we've done a bunch of patchwork with the Advantech plywood, but it looks like right here, we're awfully close. We're like 1/8 of an inch. But down there, I mean, we're talking, what, an inch plus?
Yeah, overall, I think we're talking about 2.5 inches from where you are there to the low point in this hallway.
So that's an aggressive drop.
It is.
So early on in the project, we were talking about out in this room where you actually did a lot of shimming, and ultimately, it didn't make sense to necessarily flatten it because of the existing door, the existing fireplace, things like that. We essentially rolled that floor to make the best use of the elevations we have. But moving this way, why are we going about it a different way?
A little bit of hindsight, I guess.
Sure.
But we have the new staircase that is getting built in here, so that has to be level.
Why is that?
Stairs in general, you don't want tilted treads, and this thing is being manufactured off-site. So we're giving them a fixed number, and this fixed number needs to be from side of staircase to side of staircase. It's an open staircase, so it kind of compensates it a little bit more.
So what we're trying to prevent is this first step, that riser going from, say, 7 3/8 to 6 7/8 or something.
Yeah,
like
not
that.
even an option. So
Right.
It's coming the way it's coming.
Yep.
And we're telling them what the number we want it to be. So we need to make sure we build to that number.
So from that point to here, when we were chatting earlier, you guys were talking about possibly doing this with wood, and which would be, which is a viable option.
Yeah.
But it would be multiple layers of all different thicknesses, and likely we'll probably have to go through and grind that floor in its high spots and low spots and plan that out. One option that we were just discussing, now I'm probably divulging a lot because it's early in the conversation, is could we in fact do a self-leveler? And the benefit to doing a self-leveler would be we're getting one continuous surface throughout the entire place.
Yeah.
So if you guys have feedback of doing self-leveler on an old wood floor, would love to hear that feedback. We both know that this stuff is liquid, so we'd have to fill up gaps and create dams and stuff like that. Just the success rate of doing it over a wood floor. And we actually, if you guys have seen the old video in our Lincoln kitchen, we actually had a whole video on self-leveling, but that was on top of a concrete floor. Tim, one of the questions that came up in one of the videos is this section here, and it's cantilevered framing. Can you explain what's going on with that?
So the reason why it's here is it's a landing at the top of the stairs. So the stairs wrap up, and this is how the railing would continue by and wrap back into the wall. This is just a little nook, whether for a piece of furniture or whatever it may be, but it's just nicer than having the wall right here with the railing. Kind of makes it feel a little more open. The floor kind of rolls out into the staircase a little bit.
So almost as though like you have an area that you can kind of look down on the staircase.
Yep.
And this staircase ended up being U-shaped, right?
Yep.
Now, as far as one of the details in the old brownstones is these U-shaped staircase. We're not creating a U-shaped wall above, correct?
Not on this floor. So downstairs where the staircase is radius to the staircase.
Right.
And once we get to this floor level, there'll be little pie-shaped to stain the floor and the corners, and then everything else up here stays square, same as the crown detail.
Right. So one of the things, this is where John Buckley had designed this, and it kind of is one of those moments where on this floor, we'll call it the upper floor, you do have this square opening. So if you look up, we have crown molding details and things like that.
Yeah.
We don't have a U-shaped wall, and it's almost as though you take a U-shape and you kind of extrude it through the floor, and you're left with those pie shape that Tim is talking about, and essentially it's like you're pushing the floor down into a U-shaped staircase.
Yep.
We've gotten a lot of the HVAC done. I see an air handler there. We also have one down in the basement. But can we talk about the steam? Because I think a lot of people forget that this is a multi-unit building. So why do we have steam in this unit?
That's the infrastructure that the building has to heat itself. So in this unit, rather than eliminate it, we're choosing to at least use it for now. We're doing another unit, Mitsubishi Hyperheats, that'll be AC and heat.
So that's what we have back here?
Yeah, that's what those are, the condenser outside. The thought is with these is that as long as the building infrastructure is still steam, we'll still utilize these for heat.
Right. And there's a couple of reasons to that. Number one, you know, they share the expense of the heat.
Yeah.
It is an old oil boiler, which could and can be upgraded to gas to be more efficient, but they share the expense of heat. So pulling this unit off of steam, you're still incurring the cost because you are buying into a multifamily building. So why would you spend on something that you're not utilizing?
Yeah.
But secondly, that boiler is designed to produce a certain amount of steam for a certain amount of radiators. So if we were to remove the system, which we've done in other projects and we've actually had issues with, we could actually negatively impact that and potentially overheat the units above.
It's possible.
So these are new radiators. Walk me through what you have going on and what the intent is here.
So the reason why it's out of the box in the frame is we're going to mount this to the wall on its brackets, and we're simulating wall depth here of our finished product.
Yep.
So these will be mounted temporarily. We'll pipe to them coming out of the wall because these aren't going to sit on the floor. They're going to hang off the wall.
So there's no legs on this?
No legs. They'll be basically completely piped in.
Yep.
And then unconnected, capped, and take these off site until they're ready to come back for finish. And we'll be left with our finished products coming out of the wall that we can go around with our finish and paint, and then these will just go in at the end.
And that's that's great planning because you really want this to come out of the wall really nice and neat.
Yeah.
We want it to I'm guessing that these are going to come out above our baseboard. We don't want to be in that base cap, very similar to our plumbing, right?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, this is actually a panel detail.
Okay.
So it will come out in the bottom of the panel detail.
Sure.
Yep, it's got a nice termination point.
So you have the ability to kind of line that up and make the mill work with what we have going on.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, like you said, this doesn't sit on the floor. It's mounted to the wall. Having this in place, making sure it's perfectly in the location that you need, now allows for a better finished product.
Yeah.
So we have the radiators up here, but the majority of the steam work is actually downstairs. So let's go down there and take a look at what we got going on. This is where we had a lot of existing steam pipes impacting our ceiling. So if you guys, if you remember way back, this ceiling was really low, and now you guys have done a ton of work. There's actually no pipes really that are hanging very low at all. So can you kind of walk through what we've done and how we've accomplished it?
Yeah, I would say in general, we've resupplied the building to its steam supply locations. There was 4 of them that go up through this unit.
And that means they're feeding
the rest
every
of the building,
unit, right?
yeah.
So these are steam risers, more or less, yeah.
And the returns for the steam.
Yep.
We resupplied everything, so everything came out piece by piece, and then resupplied as high as we could.
And what was determining that height?
Pitch mostly. So we already had where the pipes come through the floor, so you can only cut them so high.
Sure.
And then you have fittings and pitch to get ourselves all the way back to the boiler room on the back side of that wall there. That's the boiler room for the building.
Let's follow this. This is a supply heading up and a return?
Yep, the top one is the return, the bottom one is supply.
So coming around, this is actually pitching downhill. Why aren't the pipes in the wall?
Mechanical contractor didn't want to drill them because the steam piping itself is going to expand and contract. And
Sure.
putting it right up against wood, you're kind of asking for squeaks.
So we've run the risk of, if you've ever been in an old steam building, it makes noise, but the expansion and contraction is a real concern. So once we're in our final condition, if anything were to move or tighten up, we can't address that.
Yeah, we're limiting the amount of clips we're putting on.
Yeah.
This will be fully insulated. All the clips will get a rubber gasket where it connects to the steam pipe.
So right now they're just getting everything in place.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So what is our final wall condition? Are we doing a soffit here?
This wall, we're not going to do a soffit. It worked out that we're just going to make this doorway a fatter door, and we're going to pad this wall out a few inches and this wall out a few inches, and just bury that.
Now, is this a door?
This is a cased opening.
Cased opening. So that jamb can really be any thickness. It doesn't impact the swing of the door or anything.
Yeah.
We're actually probably creating a more, robust entrance to what is going to be the primary suite.
Yep.
So following all the way around, you had mentioned that they jet down here and they end up in the boiler room. So again, just really important detail to follow along. This is common space. This was something that we talked about early in the project. That is the mechanical room for the entire building. That's where the beast is. That's where the oil fire boiler is. So everything runs in this location. Are we doing the same thing here on this wall, Tim?
Probably not. I'm not going to rule it out necessarily, but we're already challenged in this area. This room has a lot of stuff.
So what is this
from HVAC? This is the primary closet.
Okay.
And we're not doing any crazy built-ins or anything in here. This is, a simple, nice closet that's functional.
Sure.
So there's a lot of ductwork that we try to tuck up as high as we could in here, but you still have the HVAC unit plus a drip pan, and now these pipes are all kind of in the same plane. So we're going to try to maximize the ceiling height, whether it's a wood ceiling that we build or Chicago grid style. This one's still up in the air, but really just committed to getting it as high as we can go.
And I think in a previous conversation we had talked, figuring out like, if it made sense to do a soffit, if it was a couple inches different, being that it's a closet, it's not as aesthetically important to be flat ceiling. But if we're within an inch, we'll probably just drop that ceiling down and create one solid plane. That way, if they were to ever do custom millwork and built-ins, then we're not working around soffits. And guys, I think that's an important tip to consider if you're a builder, a remodeling contractor, or even a homeowner. When you are thinking about working in a basement or areas that you have utilities that cause soffits, think about the final condition. Think about what the final condition could be. So like Tim's saying, like this closet doesn't actually have a lot of millwork in it, but it could. Or another owner might decide to put millwork in it, or maybe the current owner changes their mind and decides to put a closet here, which I think is actually in discussion. Yeah, and if you were to have a, say, 6-inch by 6-inch soffit there, maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you have a nice custom built in here and then you have a filler that is basically not 6 inches on one side, it just doesn't look intentional. And at that case, that's where it really does make sense to drop that ceiling and be one plane. So we're looking at all of that existing steam pipe. Everything was threaded pipe, threaded fittings, and we have these fittings. What are these?
These are mega press fittings.
So similar to, so it's a Vega product. And it's similar to the gas piping, I believe. And I'm assuming that it's probably a different O-ring due to the temperature, because I think this stuff gets up to a couple hundred degrees in order to create steam, certainly over boiling. But you essentially, if I can grab it, you essentially have an O-ring in here, and the pipe doesn't have any thread to it. It's straight cut, slides in, and they actually have a machine that crimps that tight and then locks this on. And if you actually look up, you see the white line adjacent to these fittings, and when they pressurize this and test it, if that white line separates from that fitting, that's where they know it's failed, and they know they have, and if it doesn't move, then they know they have a tight fitting. So this room was the same. We had a lot of pipes that were really low. You've done the same thing. When we think about replacing steam in an entire building, what was the most challenging thing that we had to face?
I mean, there's a lot of things that were pretty challenging. To stay within the steam, in this project in particular, was the return lines. So the return lines in this system were run down and below this floor. And with the new system, we really wanted to avoid utilizing those old pipes to begin with, and running new pipes underneath the floor really wasn't an option.
Because this space is never to be seen again. This is where we have that crawl space.
And a concrete floor in the other room.
Sure.
And even from an engineering standpoint, like they weren't a fan of using what they call a wet system, which would be utilizing those drains under the floor. So we switched over in this one to a dry system, and it was late in the planning. So I would say if there was anything to do with the steam that was the most complicated, it would be trying to figure out where those traps were going to go, because that's something that needs access. It needs to be maintained. So
I feel like the traps were here just the other day.
They were.
So
we raised them up. They're actually right above your head.
Gotcha.
So these are 3 over here. Okay. There's another 4 on the side where we started.
So why don't we head back over there, because this here, we're in some sort of closet.
Yep.
And you're going to have an access panel to access those and address them.
Yep.
But let's walk through those, because that's going to be a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
Being in the primary bedroom, we had talked the other day when we were on site about, okay, we need an access panel to access them, and this is going to be our bed. Yeah. This is again, primary bedroom, and we were talking about putting an access panel up high on the wall, which even with the Balco access panel plastered in, it can look great, but what are we actually gonna end up doing here to avoid that?
So we kind of switched it. So we're actually going to get this from upstairs. There was a small change. So we just located these traps not right underneath a floor joist. And what we're going to do is cut apart the floor upstairs and have the flooring lift up for maintenance later.
So that location is actually likely where a couch is going to live. So if you can think of a little trap door and, you know, a wood floor, maybe a little brass O-ring that kicks up, that floor section will pull up and they can access it. It's not something that they need to access a lot, is that right?
It is something they're going to have to maintain. It's not frequent, but probably
in some
within
sort.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah. So being tucked underneath the couch through an access panel works. It's hidden, it's out of sight, it's not impacting what could be a beautiful art wall for their bedroom. And it's really thinking about more creative solutions to, you know, not problems, but maybe challenges that come up. And being in an old building like this, you know, one of the biggest challenges that, as Tim said, we're dealing with steam that feeds the whole building. So we can't just remove our unit from the steam system, nor does it make sense to, but then we run into all of these challenges on how to keep the stuff out of our way, make sure we're maximizing ceiling heights, but also make sure that we're maximizing our maintenance ability. So guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode here in the Back Bay. Tim, thanks for joining along.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next week.